That's why.
Yeah.
It's because they wouldn't dare go in front of the UN Security Council and say, oh yeah, no, we're convinced that Iraq did it. Because the intelligence agencies of the other first world nations know that that is not true. Yeah. And W. Bush would say, and this was sophisticated for him, I mean, they made him practice it, I'm sure. But he would say, people say, why do we have to do this? Or he would even bring it up himself and he would say, people ask me, why do we have to do this? We have to do this because of September 11th. And then, wait, pregnant pause still, he's talking. Because we learned that day that you can't just wait around for threats to hit you. You have to preempt them first by starting the war first thing. But see, during that pregnant pause, because W. Bush was such an idiot, people would rewrite his grammar for him and they would assume what they thought he was saying. Why do we have to attack Iraq? Because of September 11th. Well, it sounds like what he means to say is because Iraq had something to do with the attack on September 11th. Right. Iraq was behind it. Iraq paid for it. Iraq planned it. Iraq did it.
Right.
Isn't that what he's saying? No, it's not, but you have to hold through. See, you couldn't do it. I tried to do the pregnant pause and you were ready to talk because it sounds like he's done talking, but he's not. He picks up after 6 seconds and goes, because we learned the lesson that day that from now on we get to start all the wars, which is just a bunch of crap, right? Which means nothing. Yeah. But he gets to invoke your hate and grief and fear over that terrible thing that happened so that he can essentially manipulate you into letting him do something that he knows is wrong, that he knows he has to lie to you and manipulate you to get you to allow him to do.
There's two like 500-pound elephants in the room there, though. Number one, his administration came in, in 2001 after the contentious 2000 election and didn't, they ignored a lot of these reports for all the fault that CIA had with all this stuff. And that's a whole separate conversation. There were senior people at these various agencies who were like, dude, like some shit's going to happen. Like, it's pretty fucked. And you can look at it on the July 6, 2001 meeting. You could look at it, I believe the August 11, 2001 meeting. They were like, yeah, run along. Didn't take it seriously. So then it happens and they're like, oh, fuck. And they never want that to happen again because now it's like, you're playing defense through offense all the time. The second problem here.
Yeah, but that's just bullshit, though.
It's total bullshit. It's total. No, I'm not making that argument. It's
I got
total
you.
bullshit.
You're right, though. That was what they said.
The second problem here is the psychologically brilliant but sadistic maneuver that Dick Cheney pulled on George W. Bush, which is that 1% doctrine, which is like, Mr. President, if there was even a 1% chance that a nuclear bomb could be set off in New York or Washington or insert U.S. city here, would you not want to make sure you got it to 100% that wouldn't happen? And it creates a psychology of fear of loss rather than, whatever the opposite is in that type of scenario. Yep. And Bush goes, oh, well, I already had 9/11 happen. Can't have a nuke happen. Let's attack Iraq. And so they, it's interesting. The pregnant pause example is like a pure context snafu.
I disagree that Cheney was manipulating Bush on this. Bush wanted to do this.
Oh, yes.
Bush's attitude
I agree with
was,
that.
I'm shopping for a bill of goods.
But that put him over the top.
Come on with the excuses. I need as many as I can get. 1% doctrine, that sounds like a good one. Mm-hmm. He had, at one point had said, I need a way to say this that it makes sense to the guys at the bar in Lubbock. In other words, help me lie to people so that they will falsely believe that we need to do this. Like that's it. That's what that means.
Going to Iraq.
Yeah. I mean, I was a cab driver at the time and I used to argue with people that like, look, man, remember after September 11th, we started bombing Afghanistan essentially immediately and didn't ask anybody if it was okay first? Yeah. So why do you think we're asking Russia and China and France for permission to attack Iraq?
Oh, no.
And we're waiting for a year and a half to start the carpet bombing. Just think hard now, dude. Like you're stuck in my cab in traffic. Think it through.
You're the cab driver.
It's because they didn't do it. That's why. That's why.
Yeah.
It's because they wouldn't dare go in front of the UN Security Council and say, oh yeah, no, we're convinced that Iraq did it. Because the intelligence agencies of the other first world nations know that that is not true. That's why. That's why we bombed Afghanistan a year and a half ago, and we still haven't quite invaded Iraq yet. And we're sitting around pouting that the French won't let us. And then we're going to have to just go ahead and invade even without a UN Security Council resolution, et cetera, which was never a debate over Afghanistan because it wasn't illegal to attack Afghanistan because somebody committed an act of war based out of Afghanistan. Yeah. And that was already the agreed consensus. You know, they didn't even, I don't think they even needed a UN rubber stamp on that. It was just accepted. They needed maybe a UN resolution for the continued occupation of Afghanistan or something like that, possibly. But anyway,
I needed to get in a cab with you in 2002.
That could have been a lot of fun.
That probably would have been a great reality show.
We got some work done.
Yeah,
we did used to joke about there. See, there was a show. There was a show back then called Taxi Cab Confessions on HBO.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and for people not familiar, it was. They would talk about their sex lives and then say some hilarious shit. And then they would go and say, hey, sign this waiver and we're going to put you on HBO.
Yeah.
But so it was totally candid stuff, right?
Scott's like, shut the fuck up. We're talking about Iraq.
Yeah, exactly. So mine, that was the joke, was at the time was if I could I'd have to get a good lawyer and then we just do it for the Access Channel. Mm-hmm. But instead of me asking them about their sex lives, it would be me lecturing them about the Federal Reserve System and the coming war on terrorism. And then how killer that would be if we had footage of me in 1998 going, here's what's going to happen. There's going to be a massive terrorist attack in New York, and then we're going back to Iraq. You know, yeah, those were the days. And,
wait, you called the terrorist attack in New York?
A lot of people did, by the way. A lot of people did. I mean, in fact, the Council on Foreign Relations had a giant symposium on we need to create a Department of Homeland Security because Osama bin Laden's coming. And that was in 1999, whatever. So, like, there have been a lot of attacks leading up to that.
Didn't they, in that 96 report, though, what was that called again?
I predicted the .com crash, too. That was really good. I just listen to what Ron Paul says, quite frankly.
Ron Paul knows some shit.
Go back and read his archives and be like, wow.
The 96 one, the report that they shared with Netanyahu when he came in, what was that called again?
A clean break.
Right. Isn't that, because that was written by a lot of neocon guys, isn't that also where they introduced the idea of like a major attack on U.S. soil?
No.
I'm thinking of a different one.
You're close though. This was a project for the New American Century document called Rebuilding America's Defenses from 1998.
Got it.
And it doesn't really say that. It just says, and this was a cliche at the time. I know it sounds kind of shocking at first if you hadn't heard it, but people would talk like this kind of a lot because it was obviously this was a thing. There's a reason it was a cliche. It's going to be hard to get the American empire to change direction and move in any important way without something like a Pearl Harbor attack that comes out of the blue that gives us then the incentive to get our act together and change. So people see that and they go, aha, see, they orchestrated the whole thing. But in fact, I think Zbigniew Brzezinski uses that phrase in the Grand Chessboard in a slightly different context, but essentially the same. And I remember reading like in the Wall Street Journal and stuff, people just talk about that like in the 1990s that because, you know, the narrative about Pearl Harbor was America was a sleeping giant. And once they hit the United States, then everything changed and we reoriented our whole posture and blah, blah, blah. So, you know, it is obvious too that there's a motive there to maybe allow one through. That was my assumption at the time, was that they'll allow one through so they can escalate into the new century and whatever, which is still unproven. But, you know, definitely there were a lot of people who wanted conflict and they would have and could have and should have known that that attack was coming because at the very least in 1995, Ramzi Youssef, who had done the first World Trade Center bombing, when he had escaped to the Philippines, they got his laptop and his two buddies. Wali Khan Amin Shah and Abdul Hakim Murad, but he got away to Pakistan where he was arrested the next year. But on his laptop was a plan to kill Bill Clinton and Pope John Paul II when they came to the Philippines, a plan to time bomb 12 planes over the Pacific, and a plan to hijack 10 planes and crash them into landmarks on America's coasts. And that's the planes operation that eventually became September 11th in the hands of Ramzi Youssef's uncle, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And it was Wali Khan Amin Shah, I believe, was the one who made it, or Abdul Hakim Murad, maybe this was the one who came up with the idea. And so they had that information from 1995. It's called Bojinka. And people would say that that's a Serbo-Croatian term for a big bang, but I could not verify that anywhere. And in fact, I found a Croatian who told me that that was nonsense. So I don't know where in the world the term Bojinka comes from originally, but it's that plan. And so they, that was obviously where I think that word did get out inside the government to a degree. That was a possibility. There were like Pentagon tabletop exercises that considered that a possibility. And when they arrested Zacharias Moussaoui in Minneapolis, one of the agents there said, this guy says he wants to fly from Heathrow to New York. I think maybe to JFK. I think maybe he wants to hit the World Trade Center.
He didn't like landing.
Yeah, he wasn't interested in how to take off or land. And by the way, so I write about that in this book enough already, but it's also in the new book, Provoked.
Your next title needs to be STFU America.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I'm feeling that.
Yeah, exactly. Listen up, everybody.
Everyone except Ron Paul, shut the fuck up.
Do you remember, I think you probably will, you apparently know a lot about this stuff.
I pretend to.
In 2002, Colleen Rowley won Person of the Year for Time Magazine. And she was the lawyer for the FBI office in Minneapolis, Minnesota, who the local flight school had turned in Moussaoui to the FBI. And it wasn't even the bosses there. It was the flight instructor. I think the bosses told him, don't worry about it. And he was like, no, I am worried about it, and made the call. So then they speculated, man, I wonder if this guy wants to suicide bomb New York kind of thing. So they went to Washington and said, we want a FISA warrant so that we can search this guy's stuff. Now, you may know, but I'll explain for your audience real quick. Under the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, if the government wants to search you or me or our stuff, they have to go to a judge who is pretend to at least a separate branch of government and convince him that it is more likely than not, right, probable cause, that if they look where they want to look, they will find evidence of a crime that they already know has been committed, and they're trying to prove who did that crime, right? They're not allowed to say, we want to look at this guy and go fishing on you. They have to be in search of solving a crime. And then, so that's why the Fourth Amendment says, particularly describing the things to be searched and the places to be searched and the persons or things to be seized, right?
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.